And as you have seen, I am sure, from the statement I released just a few minutes ago, we can confirm that Jeffrey Fowle has been allowed to depart the DPRK and is on his way home to rejoin his family. We welcome the DPRK's decision to release him. While this is a positive decision by the DPRK, we remain focused on the continued detention of Kenneth Bay and Matthew Miller, and again call on the DPRK to immediately release them. And the U.S. government will continue to work actively on both of their cases. We thank the government of Sweden for their tireless efforts. As you know, they are a protecting power in the DPRK, and will provide additional details about his return home when we are able to do so. We won't be able to provide a lot today, given he's still en route back, but I will attempt to answer your questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
So what more can you tell us about how this came about? What kind of TikTok can you provide? Can you specify what Sweden did to facilitate this process? And also, is he going straight home to his family, or is he going to a hospital, or is he going somewhere to be debriefed, or do you expect him to be in Dayton, your hometown, shortly?
Close to my hometown. From Columbus.
Well,
close.
Ohio.
Ohio, I know. It is some good news for the Buckeye State today. I don't have a lot more details I can share at this point. I'll tell you what I can. We'll probably be able to provide additional details over the coming days. As you know, we've been actively working for the release of all of the American citizens being detained in North Korea. We don't always go into details about our efforts. We say it from this podium a lot that we are actively engaged in this, but we can't talk about what that looks like. I think I can probably leave it at that for now. He has been evaluated by a doctor and appears to be in good health. He has, however, been in detention in North Korea. We will continue to provide any necessary consular assistance to him. We obviously have been providing it to his family. We will continue to provide it to him in the coming days and weeks if he requires that. You know, I think we'll let the North Koreans speak for themselves about why did they decide to do this, why now. But again, we are pleased that he was able to leave and urge the immediate release of the other two.
Is it fair to assume that one of the reasons why he was released and the other two have not been, is that he has not been convicted of a crime at this point?
I would let the DPRK speak to that.
Can you talk at all about how that might have played in some of the negotiations?
I am not going to at all get into our efforts here or outline those publicly.
And then to clarify, there were no U.S. envoys on the ground here, right? This was mostly facilitated by the Swedish diplomats. And
well, we're not going to give more details in general, but as we said, I think in the statement, this was a Department of Defense plane. At the request of the State Department, flew to Pyongyang to meet Mr. Fowle, left Pyongyang with him. This, again, was a DoD plane at the request of us. They have those resources.
Okay, so if I'm reading between the line, then I'm understanding that North Korea kind of arbitrarily or for whatever reasons decided to release Mr. Fowle, and that this was not a product of negotiators, whether from the United States or other countries, being on the ground.
I'm not telling you to read between the lines or indicating that. What I'm saying is we are actively working to have the Americans returned home who are detained in North Korea, and we're not going to outline what that looks like.
Can you maybe tell us?
Who made the first contact, or was this done through, you thanked the Swedes, but was Japan involved as well?
I don't have any more details to share with you about this, probably to any of the questions. I'm sorry, guys. This is obviously happening very fast, and if we do have any more details to share, we will try to.
Can you confirm that he's in Guam at the moment and that he's en route?
I can confirm that that is where the plane flew from Pyongyang. I don't know exactly if they're still on the ground or if they're on their way back, but we won't have additional details to share about his return to the United States today.
Can you talk about this
how,
window?
How unusual it is for a DoD plane to be involved? I know there have been other
Sometimes
captives
people
released.
fly commercials. This was as I said in my statement, there was a time issue that. Let me just go to it here. The Defense Department was able to provide transportation for Mr. Fowle in the time frame specified by the DPRK. I think it was a timing issue.
So they didn't specifically ask for a government plane. They just said he needs to leave by
As a
in this
condition
time.
of his release, as I said in the statement, the DPRK authorities asked the United States government to transport him out of the country. And again, in this time frame, the Department of Defense was able to offer a plane.
Can you talk more? Go ahead.
One question. So from what we understand, Pyongyang reached out to the U.S. on this one.
I'm not going to give more details about the discussions.
Oh,
I
Marie.
would remind people that there are 2 Americans still detained in North Korea, and obviously we want to preserve our ability to work actively to get them home as well.
Has any message been sent from Pyongyang about those two?
I would refer you to the North Korean government to speak for themselves. Obviously, we hope they both are next.
Can you talk about the time period, one, for actually getting Mr. Fowle off North Korean territory? How long a window was that 24 hours,
I
48
don't know
hours,
the answer to that,
72
Roz.
hours?
Let me take, I don't know. Let me take that
And
question.
how long were the discussions between the North Koreans, the Swedes, I'm assuming that they were acting as the interlocutors, and the U.S. on actually securing Mr. Fowle's release?
Well, I'm not going to confirm any details about the discussions or the ways we tried to get our American citizens home.
Did the North Koreans ask the U.S. to provide something in exchange for releasing Mr. Fowle without his having to set foot into a courtroom and
I'm just not
possibly
going to
be
confirm or
punished?
get into any more of the details of our efforts to get him, or any American home.
When was,
Whether these efforts accelerated after the three of them appeared on U.S. media
I
last
think
month?
our efforts are always intense to try and
Was
get
there
our
any
Americans
change,
home.
though, in terms of the
I'm
negotiations?
not going to get into any more discussions
what was
on
the
that.
time period that the North Koreans asked for? You were,
I said to Roz I would check on that. What I referred to in my statement,
the one that, right, exactly.
I can check on that. I don't have that information.
Were you, was the United States government surprised that the North Koreans had alerted them, you all, to say, send a plane, he's coming out?
Well, I think that we think this is a positive step. But that does not change the fact that we remain concerned about Kenneth Bay and Matthew Miller. We work very hard in a variety of ways that we don't publicly outline to get these Americans home.
You say you work very hard on ways to have
We do.
American citizens released. Why can't you say we have worked directly or indirectly with the North Koreans on this particular case?
Because we're not going to detail our efforts to get them home, in part because
But you
there's
are
still.
acknowledging that you are doing everything that you can to
Yes,
have your
but I'm
citizens
not going to get into the
released.
details about what that looks like, in part, Saeed, because there are still 2 Americans there that we feel need to be immediately released and returned home.
Did you have a reaction when Matthew Miller was sentenced to 6 years hard labor? Did you put
I
in
think
a
I
statement?
have this statement, when I was asked about it at the briefing, I believe I said at the time that we have seen those reports and would urge the DPRK to immediately release him and return him home to his family.
Is it reasonable to assume that because the Pentagon was asked to remove Mr. Fowle from North Korean territory, that he's going to stop first at a U.S. military installation in
I
South
think-
Korea?
No, they went to Guam from Pyongyang, as I just said, where there is an American military installation. And then he will return home. I'm not going to detail the specifics of that travel. Give him some time to get home and be reunited with his family.
And when was his family notified? And were they notified so quickly that they're still here in the United States and weren't able to travel to meet him partway, if not all the way?
We're not going to get into discussions about the discussions we have with the families. We have ongoing discussions with them. They were, of course, made aware of the fact that he would be coming home.
Well, I'm just trying to get a sense of how sudden was this decision by North Korea to release him. I mean, ostensibly, if it looks as if something is in place, people are sometimes given the ability to move from where they
You also
start.
hypothetically want to make sure that it's real, and you don't want to get, the hopes of families up if in case it's not. So obviously, when we talk about consular assistance in these kinds of cases, broadly speaking, you want to make sure that before you actually notify a family that their loved one will be coming home, that is in fact the case.
When did you actually do the notification? Because the lawyer said today that they had not received official notification that he was on his way home. So when
Well, he
did,
wasn't on his way home until today.
right, and I'm saying
Right.
within
So
the
we-
last hour,
In
the
general,
lawyer put out a statement saying, we're hearing it in the media, but we haven't gotten official notification.
in general, I'm not going to get into specifics about notification here for privacy considerations and personal considerations, obviously, but in general, we want to wait to make sure that in fact the loved one is returning home. We did that in this case, and the proper notifications were made.
He had been in detention since, according to North Korean authorities, April 29th. And even though he was married to a woman who ostensibly needed his assistance to basically translate for her because she's not a native U.S. citizen, he was over there by himself as a tourist and supposedly not proselytizing. Do you believe his story?
Well, it's not about whether or not we believe his story, and I would remind people that we have a very strict travel warning in place telling Americans not to travel to North Korea for a variety of reasons, but no, it's not. I think today it's not about whether or not we believe his story. We believed, as we did today, we did yesterday, that he should be immediately released, as he has been, that he should be returned home. I just don't have more analysis on his time there to give you.
Is Pyongyang willing for the U.S. to send envoys to North Korea now for the other 2 people who are being
I
detained?
will let them speak for that willingness. We've seen in the past that often happen, and we've said we are ready to send one if they invite them to return, but to my knowledge, their position hasn't changed on that, but again, I refer you to them.
Change topics?
Sure.
Isis?
Okay.
Sorry.
I probably don't have much more to add, so let's just do a few
Well,
more.
North Korea, but a different issue.
Uh-huh.
What is your reaction to comments made by North Korea's deputy UN ambassador on a couple of fronts? One, he said that the U.S. has been masterminding international criticism of North Korea's human rights record. Basically, in a VOA interview, he accused the U.S. of a smear campaign and said if this continued, that North Korea will review its policy towards America. He also stated that there is a new policy in North Korea, and it will result in an expansion of nuclear weapons.
Well, I haven't seen the specifics in that interview, but I'd say a few points. The first is on the human rights situation in North Korea. We call it how we see it, and we are deeply concerned and remain deeply concerned about the ongoing systematic and widespread human rights violations in the DPRK. They are clearly documented by the UN's Commission of Inquiry. This isn't about the United States. This is about the world standing up and saying there's a very serious human rights situation in North Korea. So that's how I would respond on the human rights side. But on the nuclear side, we and our parties in the six-party talks have been very clear that our goal is the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That is what we are working towards. That is what, if you talk about these talks in the past and what North Korea has said they were willing to do, we obviously believe that that needs to be the ultimate goal. Saeed, yes.
Can we-
Can you just clarify, you've said that you wanted to send an envoy and the North Koreans have refused. Have you offered to send anybody other than Robert King, or is it Robert King that
Well,
you've been
in the
trying to send?
past, the invitation has been for him, and that offer stands on the table if the invitation were to be re-extended. That's what we've been focused on here.
But you haven't put anybody else forward?
I don't have any more details about these discussions for you.